I lived in Israel for 2 years after I graduated college, and I did that. Um, I say only half jokingly, so that I felt guilty that I couldn't speak Hebrew after going to Jewish day school for 13 years. So I wanted to feel like my parents got their money's worth, at least. Um, but really, it was in the aftermath of the first Gulf War, and I started to think more about my Jewish identity and my American identity. And I think that also had to do with the fact that when I went to college, it was the first time I met and became friends with people who were Jewish, but who weren't very Jewish, if that makes sense. So I was like the most Jewish of all of my Jewish friends, even though I'm not particularly religious. So I started to realize that my Jewish identity is a little bit different than most of my Jewish friends' Jewish identity. And I started thinking more about Israel and what role that played in my Jewish identity. And not knowing much about it other than as an abstraction or as something that you learn in school, but not really having a feel for the living organism that is the state of Israel and the people who live there and the day-to-day life there. I just was curious, and I went and I spent 2 years there, and I learned how to speak Hebrew fluently. And I came back to the United States to go to grad school. And when I finished, there was an opening at the mission of Israel to the UN. And I thought, this is the coolest job I've ever heard of in my life. And I went in, I met the ambassador, and we had a conversation. And, a few weeks later, I got the offer and I immediately accepted. I was really psyched. And, the ambassador, it was an old school Labor Party guy who, when you think of Israeli, you can probably see a picture of him. And my dad, who was also like no shrinking violet, he once saw the ambassador on TV and he called me up. He goes, "Man, he looks like one tough son of a bitch." And he was a tough guy, and he was interesting because he was a poet, but he also was kind of like a tough dude. Um, and the first day I started working there, I heard these stories about his temper. So I immediately made a promise to myself that I was not going to get yelled at by him ever. I was not going to do anything that would cause him to lose his temper on me. And there was one time where I really messed up. He told me very specifically not to do something, and I did it. And the next morning when I came into work, his administrative assistant called me in my office and said, the ambassador wants to talk to you. And I knew what was coming. I walked into his office and I said, before you can say anything, I know I messed up. You told me not to do this and I did it. And I'm sorry. I have no explanation. I don't know why I didn't listen to you, but I'm sorry. And it won't happen again. And you could see that he wanted to yell at me, but I deflated him so much. He's like, okay, just don't do it again. And he let me go. And that was all to avoid his wrath.